How you doing, Eric?
How you doing, man?
Not too bad.
I'm doing pretty good.
Thanks for having me on. Yep, you're doing pretty good. Coming off your Southwest Nationals win. Congratulations.
Thank you, sir. Yep, as you know, it's really anybody's match. You know that.
Yeah, and you could shake up the top 20 at any of them, and who's ever on is on, and you were on. Yeah, no doubt about it. They told me you would shoot clean, and it was impressive conditions for you to shoot clean in. So yeah, congratulations. And what I thought was funny, it was like you said, you didn't win any of the matches. No single match did you win, but you won the ag, and not just by a little bit. It was nice.
Yeah,
it was. Great job.
Thank you. Yeah, it was. As you know, I don't like to go around and ask scores or whatever, so I didn't know how I was doing. Yeah. I knew because people would start to come up at the end of the day, but at the same time, like on day one, Joe Fairley won it. He only dropped 1 point.
Him and Dan Bramley.
Dan Bramley only dropped 1 point. Yeah. And so everybody was going up to them, and I'm just sitting there 4 down, and I'm going, okay. And, that's how I knew they were only down 1 because, people talk. So I was like, cool, I'm in the hunt. That's all I ever asked for, be in the hunt.
Yeah.
And then the next day, holy crap.
That next day was brutal. But yeah, you did well. I think, what'd you drop on that second day?
4 overall.
4, yeah. That was impressive. And nothing against any of the shooters, but there's a difference between people who, I don't want to say get lucky, but have good strings, and people who could have good strings over the full, aggregate, 3 days, and that's what's impressive. So yeah, you did very well.
Thank you. Yeah, that first, and again, I'd stand there and look, and I go, man, what am I going to do here? Like, oh, this is tough. I mean, because I would put 4 to 5 minutes on the gun, and I'd be like, okay, here we go. And I jump in, and then I would actually pick my way through it. And Bill's to my right, and he just shooting through everything.
Well, there's 2 different types of shooters, right? I mean, as you know, there's guys that can stop and start and pick. That works great sometimes. There's guys that can string shoot, start and never stop, and works great sometimes. And I think it's great to have multiple tools in your toolbox to be able to do both. I mean, and it's just different types of shooting, and it's not that one shooter is better than the other. It's just different styles, and one style works great sometimes, and one works great another.
Yeah, you were talking about the different types of shooters, the in different. I guess you can call that ammunition, wind reading ammunition that they have, and
or tools in the toolbox. We like to say, what tools do you have in your toolbox?
Yeah, so you can shoot fast. That's not a problem, and like you said, that can be very beneficial if you have a short window where you can just get all your shots on paper, just get them in there, get done, get out of there. But
yeah, when I shot my 219X at 1,000, that was done in 3.5 minutes. But that condition, it was edge of black conditions, but it was incredibly consistent, and you can watch that cyclic event of the wind prior to shooting. And I think a lot of guys in prep, they're not looking at those conditions to see, is that condition going to stay? Is it switching 3 times during prep? If it is, you probably don't want to get in right away when they say, okay, you're good to go hot. And I think that's one of the bigger mistakes newer shooters make. And I always tell them, look around you, see who's a good shooter. If they're not shooting, you probably shouldn't be shooting. And I say that's the number one thing you can watch for, and you'll see it. You'll shoot next to guys like Gosnell and other guys on the national team, and it's like, they're not shooting. Why are you shooting it and shooting 9s? And just stop and learn from that.
Hey, you got a minute?
I'm a little busy. I'm actually doing an interview with Bryan Blake. What's up?
Oh, nice. Have you been on his website lately? I was looking at one of his ammo blocks.
Yeah, the auto dot is what I use to turn my brass. The CNC version, dude. It's a no-brainer.
Very nice. Yeah, I was actually checking out. He's got a new spotting scope stand that hooks right up to my Neo.
The Neo X, right?
Yeah, Neo X. Old Neo. He has it hook up to everything. Rodzilla. If you have a rest, it'll hook up to it. I was actually talking to my friend where he's going to be at Nationals, and he just picked up that whole complete kit for the 7 FCP cartridge he makes.
So you can actually get the whole kit. You can get a barrel, you can get the reamer, you can get the dies, you can get the headspace gauges, you can get a headspace
Yeah.
comparator, you can actually get the Giro trimmer little case holder.
Yeah, that's what
thing.
my buddy did. He got the whole package, and he said his customer service is absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, as you know, go check it out, FClassProducts.com. And I got to go, dude, because I'm kind of tied up.
All right. Sorry. We'll talk later.
All right, man. Later. Bye.
All right. Bye.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that, because on the last day at Southwest Nationals, on the last string of the day, you know, the second one, you know how it got real calm, but there was heavy Mirage and it was switchy.
Yes. Yep.
That looks exactly like Bayou Rifle Club.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
Tim Vaught was to my right and Bramley was to my left.
Yeah.
And when they said go, I'm like, I'm not shooting in this, right? Because I was waiting for
and
it.
it switched.
And
A couple
Bramley,
minutes after they said that.
Bramley started shooting, and Tim Vaught's to my right, and he's not shooting. And I found that a bit funny, because he and I both shoot at Bayou, and those conditions were very similar to Bayou Rifle Club, and he and I were both not shooting. And Tim and I don't know if he was waiting on me. I don't think he was. I mean, he's very experienced. He doesn't need to wait on nobody.
Oh, yeah. He doesn't need to steal shots.
No, he knows exactly. And he's got a pretty nice hubcap collection
Yeah.
already. But
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
anyway,
yeah,
the point is, it was interesting that he and I were both not shooting. And he and I pretty much jumped in at the same time and finished it off at the same time.
Yeah.
But it's those conditions that you kind of recognize and you go, I would like to shoot in that if possible.
Yeah, and yeah, if you can pick and choose, especially in those conditions, the string you're talking about, it was, you know, a 3-ring condition, but it was very switchy, and it switched sides twice in that string. And, you know, the guys that start out shooting on that right to left, I think it was, you know, 2.5, 3-ring condition on the right, it switched fast, and you watch multiple shooters just 9, because they were trying to ride that switch to the other side. And other type shooters that have that tool in their toolbox where they can say, hey, I don't want to shoot this. I don't want to shoot this dirty Mirage or this switch, you know, where you're able to use a different tool even throughout the string. You know, those are usually the shooters that ag the best match after match.
Yeah, I didn't want to shoot in the right wind, so I waited and I waited, because what happened is during prep it was coming from the left, and I really liked that.
Yeah.
And then by the time we started, it was coming from the right. So I thought, I'm just going to sit here.
It only lasted 3-4 minutes maybe. Then it switched.
Yeah, and I thought, I'm just going to sit here and wait it out.
Yeah.
You know, all I need is about 7-8 minutes. I got 22 minutes that I can wait it out and watch it, you know?
Yep.
And he came from the left. Don't get me wrong, I still took a couple of siders there just to see what it was doing.
To bracket, yeah.
Yep. And then when it switched, it sat there coming from the left, and I thought, man, that looks good. I'm going to take a couple of siders in there. So I held the left 1, and I hit a downwind 10. So then I held the left 2, and I hit an X, and I go, man, hit another left 2, hit another X, and I'm like, I'm just going to go here and see how far I can get. The minute it changes, I'm going to hit the brakes, and I was able to get all my 20 off. No problem.
And you know, I remember you did an interview with Bob Mead after he won nationals in 2017, I believe, and he said, you know, the biggest, I wouldn't say mistake, but the biggest thing I see shooters do is when you have unlimited sighters, they're not using that to bracket these switchy conditions. They're using that to shoot only the right to left, and all of a sudden it switches, and they don't know what that left to right was doing. And he says, use your sighters, especially unlimited, bracket that condition. Spend 5 minutes doing that. And I remember that's what he told you after he just won, and I thought that was good advice. You know, there's guys that can just look at a condition, and Tim Bott's one of them. He can just look at a condition, know what it is. And there's other guys that try to calibrate their brain during those sighters on what that is. And one thing Bob Siebold taught me a long time ago, he says, calibrate your gun to your eyes. And I says, what do you mean? He says, if you look at a condition and you think it's a 4 right, you take a shot and it should have been a 5, put, you know, quarter minute, half minute on your gun, calibrate your gun, even though the wind zero's off, to your head, to your brain. And you're able to follow that, you know, throughout that string, just because your brain is now calibrated that gun for those conditions.
Yeah, you're not going to calibrate your brain. Not
Well,
as
you're
easily.
going to change the gun. You're going to change your gun to meet your brain. Is basically what he said.
Yeah, zero your gun to your brain, and
Yeah.
but yeah, I mean, those are little small tricks that most people don't know about, and
Yeah.
oftentimes they're very lost. Not having a good zero is not having a good
Yes,
win zero
that's-
is just like Speedy would say, death on a stick.
Yeah, it's when you're shooting those 2-3 ring conditions and it swaps to the other side 2-3 rings, you're not going to be in the zone. I mean, you have to have a good, and I say 1,000-yard win zero. I know people do 100-yard. I like set my guns up half-inch left at 100 and for spin drift, and that usually lines up right at 1,000.
Yeah, but so the problem with 1,000-yard zero is people want to go to 1,000 and zero their guns, and it's like it's almost impossible. Like,
Well, you have to get that zero over days, multiple days. Conditions that are from the right, conditions from the left, conditions that are dead, and they all have to match up, in my opinion. You can't just go out and get a 1,000-yard win zero in one setting, in my opinion.
well, that's what I'm saying. Where 100 is you can get 100, and then like you said, move it left. But then
Yep.
that requires that you have a a level that is set up properly. Your scope needs to be set up properly.
Yep.
You have to do a tall
String
target
test.
test, and you
Yep.
got to do that regardless. That should be
Yep.
done regardless. But
Yep.
mathematically, like I said, I like doing 100 just because you can get 100 at any time. For example, let's
Yep.
just say I had to switch scopes. I can
Yep.
run to the 100-yard range, sight it in,
Yep.
and be back at 1,000.
But you still got to be careful. Like a 10-mile-an-hour full value win and 100, that's 5/8 of an inch, or 0.5, 0.6 MOA difference. So you got to kind of watch that also. I've seen guys make that mistake.
Yeah, well, Speedy calls it dead air zero at 100.
Yep, that's the best way. I agree.
But anyway, there's just so many things, and you talked about the new shooters, and they struggle a lot because of they think they don't know how to read the wind. They're not as bad as they think. It's just most of the time their equipment's set up improperly, and
Yeah,
everybody's holding. Like you talk about a three ring condition, they're holding 3 ring. I mean, everybody's holding three, 2.5 rings, and they're holding 5 or 6, and they're just scared
Yeah.
to death because there's a lot of wind. And then when it flips the other way, they go
Then they're lost.
they go upwind, right? And the problem is, it's not that
Yep.
the wind was, I've heard it many times. Well, the wind was coming from the left, but it still shot upwind. That was a
Yeah,
weird
no,
condition. No, your zero's off.
No. Yeah, exactly. Or you're not reading that condition, from that right to left or left to right, and have that calibration psychologically. When we practice, Dan Bramley and I, we'll take a shot a minute, and sometimes we'll take a shot, and if conditions aren't changing, we won't take another shot because you're not going to learn anything from that wind condition just string firing through the same condition. So we try to always pair fire, always get different conditions to get those practice shots in. And even if that means, like you said, that 4 or 5 minutes on the gun condition, I bet that 3/4 of the shooters at Southwest Nationals would never even practice on that because it's too windy. And I had a guy yesterday, a friend of mine, I won't name who it is, but he says, it's 20 miles an hour wind, I can't shoot. And I says, so if it's that much wind when we're in Raton, you're going to go pack up? Well, no, I'll have to shoot it. But you're not going to practice it. Well, no, it's too much. And I says, do you see the problem here? I says, practice in what you shoot. And a lot of shooters, they don't understand that. They think only practice. They want to see how good their gun shoots in those conditions, in super low conditions. Well, there's no points or there's no awards for the tightest group. There's points for points. And I try to explain that to these shooters. But I learned, I started shooting at the end of 2017, 2018 with my first Southwest Nationals, but I watched guys like you and Jim Murphy and these guys that have been around for a long time that competed even in the last world event. What do these guys do? I would just be a sponge and just cheat off of. Obviously, these guys know what they're doing. You were 5th in the worlds. He was 4th in the worlds. I need to learn from guys like this. So I would just sit back and watch because I would usually not be on the same string as you guys because wasn't as high classification. And I think a lot of new shooters don't take advantage of that. They don't watch and observe what these top shooters are doing and steal that intel. I mean, it's free intel right in front of them. And ask questions. You know, if guys came up to you, I remember coming up to you, you didn't even know who I was. You answer my questions. I've never seen anybody not answer a newbie's questions. So, yeah, I always tell them, don't be afraid. You know, ask away.
Well, to be fair, you asked me where the restaurant was. That was an easy one to answer.
I had to warm up to you. I mean, you know, I couldn't just come out right in the beginning and say, "Hey, how do you point bullets?" You know.
Yeah. No, seriously. I mean, everybody's very willing to help, especially the new guys, especially if they ask good questions. You're a smart guy. You did a lot of prep work on your own in the sense of learning, reading, and I could tell, right? It's you can tell a shooter by the questions they ask.
Yeah.
You know, you're an experienced shooter now, and I'm sure you can relate to that. Some people will ask you, like, I don't know, it's just like, what's the best barrel length? And it's like,
yeah,
it doesn't matter. Like,
yeah,
you know what I mean? So
you're not
when they ask those questions, you want to help them, but at the same time, it's like, man, this is one of those that, you know, you can go online.
Yeah.
Everybody knows what everybody else is shooting. You know what I mean? Those are questions that can be answered with a simple Google search, right?
Yeah.
Or they'll ask you again. You know, I'm just talking about the simplicity of the question. Kind of tells me where those shooters are at, and you know, there's some shooters that will ask, "Hey, you know, how do you read Mirage?" Wow, okay, that's a good question, because
that's a long answer.
And I'll tell them how I read it, right? And I'm like, this is what I do. You know, hopefully it'll help you.
Yeah,
helps me.
And I remember you. I want to say 2019 TSRA. PJ and you had a what I would call private conversation about the Mirage during that event, and it was some sort of secret. I still don't know what you guys said, but PJ went on, I believe, to win it in TR, and I remember him saying, "Yeah, that's because Eric just taught me this," and I was just dumbfounded, like, you know, PJ's a good shooter. Peter Johns, did he really need that advice? He made it sound like he did, and it was a secret between you guys and led him to a win. So obviously there's certain questions you can ask, experienced or non-experienced, and learn just a little bit. I mean, just like you and I. We'll sit on the trolleys going back and forth to the pits. We'll have a conversation about things still today. Bounce ideas off each other.
Yeah. Well, PJ not only won TSRA that year, he won by like 12 points.
Yeah, it was a big margin.
So what happened was they struggled during the team match.
Yeah.
And I don't think they won. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty sure they didn't win, which is the reason I approached them. And I said, "What's going on, man? You all right?" He says, "Man, I just can't. I'm lost. I have no idea how to read this stuff." And I said, "Well, you're an FDR shooter. I'll never have to worry about you in F Open."
Yeah, that didn't last but about a year.
Let me give you some advice on how to read this Mirage. And I told him how to do it, and boom, man. And every time he'd shoot, he'd come back, he goes, "Man, it's working. That trick is working." And to this day,
it was impressive.
Yeah, to this day.
And I still don't know the secret. I'm hoping one day that, you know, I can learn that same secret.
You got to go to TR.
I don't know what. Well,
you got to go shoot TR.
I've asked him and I've asked you, and I still can't get the answer. So, and people that don't understand Bayou, TSRA, we're talking about Texas State Long Range. That range, I've shot over the country, multiple ranges. That range is like looking through water at times. I mean, there's so much humidity in the air. It's right by the ocean. And it's totally different. The first 2 years I went there, completely bombed. There are tricks to it, but it's totally different than any range in the nation as far as reading that Mirage, in my opinion.
Well, there's just more of it. That's the difference.
It's like looking through the ocean. You know, coming from Arizona, our Mirage is hot, dryish type Mirage. You go there, it's like I'm thinking there should be fish floating in that sucker. There's so much water in the air. And obviously you have it figured out. You've won it 4 times. So yeah, that's an impressive range to win at. Let's just say that. And so yeah, you and PJ, you got it figured out.
Well, thank you.
Now PJ's come over to our side, and now you've jinxed the rest of us.
I wish I could unplug that flash drive. You know.
Yeah, pull that part of the memory out, huh?
Yeah, I wish I could do that. No, he's a great shooter, and that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
He's a great shooter. He had already, and that's the difference, right? That's precisely why I approached him, because I knew he was a good shooter, but I see him struggling, so I'm like, everything okay? And then he tells me, he could have said, yeah, I'm fine, and walked away.
Yeah, but what was he going to learn from that? I mean,
but he was like, no, man. He was just like, I'm struggling. I don't see it. And I'm like, well, let me tell you what I do. Hopefully it'll help you.
Yep.
And it did. And like I said, every time he'd shoot, he just go damn near either clean or damn near clean it with his 308 and come back and tell me it's working. It's working. So he and I both won it that year, which was good. That's the year I had to drive home at night and load ammo.
I remember. I remember. I think you said you weren't really planning on maybe winning or being at the top, and then you turned out to be at the top from the first day. And you decided, well, I better go back and load ammo.
Well, I went there to shoot the team match, and then I just brought extra ammo just to shoot. And then I ended up being second place on day 1. And the only reason I was second place was because it was really windy. And seriously, because the gun wasn't shooting that good.
I get you, and when I go to events and those flags are down, I know I can't be at the top, and I'm just not that good of a shooter. I don't believe I can be as consistent on the gun as some of these other shooters. But if it gets windy, I believe I can read that heavy wind better than other shooters, and that's the only time, I can be at the top. For me, I can shoot put 3 to 4 minutes on the gun, hold edge of black condition, better than I can shooting a 3 to 4 ring condition with nothing on the gun. It's just how my brain works. And at Bayou, it never gets that windy. I've never seen 4 to 5 minutes on a gun every time I've shot there. But it's tricky wind. And what people don't understand, Bayou's about knowing when to stop. And I've learned this from the locals there, Johnny Ingram. Hey, you see that condition out there? And I'm looking. I says, yeah. He says, I wouldn't shoot that. And I says, what do you mean? He says, you're going to shoot a 10 out the top if you're lucky, and it's probably going to be a 9. I says, nah, my gun's shooting flat, and sure enough. And those guys that know those conditions know what to do and when to stop.
Well, that's where that's kind of where I learned, and I'm not afraid to stop. You've seen me shoot.
Oh yeah,
I'll hit the brakes, and I'll just jump back in when it's either I'm going to jump back in when I'm comfortable or when I have no choice.
Yep, and you'll see, and I tell shooters that, it says, you're going to shoot 5 9s trying to chase this condition that you have no idea what it is, or you could stop, get back in it, shoot 1 9, and then continue on. And I try to teach them that you're better off doing that, because if you're shooting 2 or 3 9s in a row on not super crazy conditions, you're not seeing it. And you just need to stop and reset your brain and get back in it, and you'll usually do pretty good.
This is a question that I ask them. I said, what's your confidence level that at any time you can have a 9 on your first shot for record? And not for record, but like on paper. If you remove everything, and I said, whatever condition, I said, if you were trying to hit a 9, not an X, not a 10, a 9, which is 2 MOA. I said, what's your confidence level that you can hit it every time? They're like, they'll come back with like 80 or 90%. I said, exactly. Yeah. So stop. Yeah. And then just start over. You should be able to hit 9, no problem. Because not only do you already have all that data that you have, right? From shooting, I said, just stop, shoot a 9, and keep going. Yeah. And they just have such a hard time doing that. I
think that's the toughest part about shooters. And you'll see it let's just take the top 10 from Southwest Nationals. I'm not going to name names, but half of those guys cannot stop. Half of them can stop. Obviously, they're in the top 10 because they're great shooters. It's just different tactics. I believe it was Southwest Nationals last year was super calm conditions, and there's lots of shooters that can do great in that, and there's shooters that can't. And there's just how many tools you have in that toolbox that you can use and pull out throughout the string is going to make you a better shooter overall in the ag.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where, my buddy FClass John, he was having a really tough day. And I said, you're not going to win. Stop. Quit letting it stress you out. You're not winning. Go practice. Just go and use this windy conditions to practice.
Learn.
And he learned, came back the next day and won everything. Took the ag for the day. And I'm like, that's how you do it.
Yeah, I mean, especially, I know I've seen you do it back 3 or 4 years ago. I've seen Bob do it for your team. You've told me, I'm taking shots I wouldn't normally take before the team event, so I know what this condition will do, and I can use that data for the team. I know I'm not going to win this match, but I can take that intel and info and use it for my team. And I thought that was good advice as well.
Yeah, sometimes you just got to quit trying to win that match and start working on winning the next one. And that's it, If you're not first, you're last.
Well,
shake and bake.
Unfortunately, that's what gets in a lot of our heads. And, like I say, I'm just shooting for relays now. I'm not going to win the ag, but I'm going to still do the best I can each relay.
So you come into FClass. How did you get to FClass?
So kind of go back a little bit. My grandfather bought out a gunsmith in 1966. His name was Bill Sucali, who's kind of a famous gunsmith for building hunting rifles for higher end people. He got out of it, and my grandfather and my dad was 10 years old at that time. He bought all the rifling equipment, all the barrel making equipment, brought it, it was here in Phoenix, brought it to our shop in Phoenix, made barrels. And after a couple of years, my grandfather figured out there's way more money and way less stress with dealing with the public doing the industrial side of things. So they kind of retired all the barrel making equipment. Well, fast forward to about 2015, I had interest in it, so we got all the barrel making equipment back out. They never sold it. We started rebuilding it all. So we did that, and I wanted to see what these barrels would do. I wasn't a good shooter. So I went to some good shooters, even locally. Dan Bramley, one of them, and I says, hey, I'll just give you a barrel, or barrels, a couple of them, just try them. And Dan told me, I'm not going to take a no-name barrel and try it. And I says, what do you mean? I says, it's free. He says, no, it's not. He says, it cost me 3 hours of chambering, and he says it cost me hundreds of miles of traveling to ranges and testing, and all these components and all this time. He says, it's not free. He says, I'm not going to take a unknown and try to make it a known. My other barrels shoot great. And I thought, okay, that makes sense. If nobody wants to shoot them, I'll shoot them. And my local range, they have 500, and they would practice F-class. So my first rifle I built it on a Mauser Action, because that's all I had and all I knew, and put it on a bench rest stock and trued up the action, and I made it a 280 Ackley. And I think my first match I shot at 500 yards was a 578 17X. Obviously not good for 500 yards. But that made me want to improve. So a month goes by, I go to another match, I think I shot low 580s. At that time, Dan Bramley, he kind of sees me taking interest, and he somewhat takes me under his wing and says, here, this is what you need to do, you need to change, you need to get a better action, a better stock. So I did that, got an F-class McMillan stock, got a board in action. Come, I think September, October of that year, I'm shooting with him, and now I'm shooting 595s. So it's decent. So, the Worlds had just passed. The Nationals was passed. So there's nothing really for me to do. So I practiced. For the first year, I shot 15,000 rounds. This was back when you can get bullets cheap, powder cheap, and it was everywhere. And I didn't want to be that guy that spent years trying to get high master. So at the first state championship, I want to be high master. I shot I think a 590. So I was able to achieve high master, and from then I just wanted to keep improving. And you know, Dan Bramley being kind of local to me, he took me under his wing. He taught me a lot, you know, and I just kind of took that from there and tried building it. And now we've built a whole business specifically revolving around FClass, and I think we're the only business that's that way.
Yeah, you've come a long way for sure. The and you know, we need to mention the fact that your background is machining, right? You were a machinist.
Yep. I worked as a machinist from, my dad taught me, my grandfather in the shop since I was about 9. At 17 years old, right out of high school, I worked as an engineer at an engineering firm. They taught me the design part of it, the 3D modeling part of it, and then after 2-3 years, I came back to the family business and, you know, just ran stuff in the shop. And then as I started shooting FClass, I would go to the line and I would just see problems people would have with how they were shooting, how they were setting up, and I wanted to help fix problems. And every product we make, we try to revolve around building something better or different than some other company already has. So that's where my background came from. So yeah, engineering and machining is where I've started from.
Yeah, so you start shooting FClass, and
Yep.
you immediately start turning necks differently.
Differently,
You start
you're
pinch
right.
turning. Like I was familiar, you know, and I remember clearly people were just getting on your case like that's wrong
Oh.
and this is, and I said, and I went on there. I said, no, it's called pinch turning, and that's really the way, the right way to do it.
Yeah.
If you had a way, that's the right way because, so pinch turning. Explain pinch turning for those that don't know what pinch turning is.
Pinch turning is basically taking anything and having an inside cutter and an outside cutter both going on the cut simultaneously at the same time. And what that is allows no variation in the thickness of what you're cutting. And pinch turning is nothing new. In fact, you know, our patent attorneys, when we got our machine patented, they're finding pinch turning going back to the 1800s in patents. It's nothing new. It's just it wasn't being applied to case necks. So I started doing pinch turning in a hard-inch chucker lathe right from the very beginning. And my main first thought was, it's taking a lot of time to turn the inside and then turn the outside. It says, I need to do this simultaneously. So that's when we, you know, developed the IDOT machine.
Yeah, and like I said, when you first started, people were they just didn't. I guess they didn't understand. The majority of the people didn't understand.
One problem with FClass is nobody likes change. Okay, bench resters are even worse. FClass is second worst. If you're doing something unconventional, it's automatically no good. They don't need to have proof why or why not. It's just, hey, that's not how we do it. You're doing it wrong. And it says, what's wrong? That's not how we do it. And this even, you know, down to I'm the one, as far as I know, first one that started doing split bags on the bottom of a Neo. And people told me you can't do that. And I says, why? Is it illegal? They says, well, in bench rest it is, but not in FClass. But we don't do that. We shoot on a one-piece bottom. And I says, okay, but this is better for my application, so I'm going to do it. And I think that's the biggest problem with innovation is people think just because it hasn't been done, that's the way that it should not be done.
Well, I told the story. I did a live podcast with Speedy, and he was interrogating me.
Yeah.
But that's what it reminded me of Henry Ford's quote that said, if I had asked my customers, they would have asked me for a faster horse.
Yeah, exactly. I needed to show them something they didn't know they needed.
Yeah, so that's what you did. You came up with the you were pinch turning, and you had good results, and then you started with the IDOT machine.
Even before that, I think David Mann, he knew I pinch turned. He sent me 500 pieces of WSM brass for me to turn, and I says, I don't do this as a business. And he says, I want it done that way. So we did it, and during that process of me turning David Mann's brass, I'm like, maybe I should just build a machine so people can do this, so I don't have to turn it for them. because I didn't want to be that guy just brass turning for people. So then we started to think how to build a benchtop version of this.
Yeah, the I have one, as you know.
Yeah.
And turning brass is quite easy now. Like a lot of people are trying to get away from turning brass, and I'm like, I don't care. Like for me, peace of mind, it's just there.
It's one more variable you don't have to worry about, in my opinion.
Yeah. So anyway, I do it. IDOT does it. It's super easy. Especially, I am going to say you got to have the CNC version. Just because, and I proved it to myself. Because I tried your original one, and I wasn't very satisfied.
The manual version.
The manual version.
Yep.
Because I just, in machining,
Yep.
if you vary your feeds and speed, in this case you would vary just the feed. Well, it'll cut thinner, right? So
Thinner or thicker depending on where you're at.
right. So that's why I didn't really like the original. When you came up with the CNC, I'm like, okay, now I'm game. And then after I got it, I proved it to myself because you have different speeds. And
variable.
And if I if I'm shooting for, I don't know, whatever. Let's just say I'm shooting for 13 thousandths neck wall thickness, and I end up at 13.1 or 13.2. I slow it down.
Yep.
I don't adjust the cutters.
Yep.
But what I did is I proved it to myself. I cut 3 different cases at 3 different speeds, and they gave me 3 different thicknesses, and I go, okay, perfect. So anyway, that was just a test. That was just a test that I did, and now it's on. I hit my target every time. It's fast. Now, here's the one, and we probably should talk about it because every time I show it, people go, "You just turned the case, and now you're beating the crap out of it." That just ruined the case.
Yeah.
How did you come up with that to begin with? Because that's another one of those, like, you don't do that. We don't do that, but it works just perfectly fine.
Getting the cases out of the case holder, you mean?
Yeah, when you tap it out.
So the original design, in fact, on the first 20 machines, there's a slot in the base plate. And we made a slotted piece of aluminum that would pry, and it would hit on the shoulder and then pop that case out. Well, the problem was if you didn't pop it just right, you completely trashed and dented the shoulder. So actually, the pounding on the end of the case was done from one of my first customers, and that was Steve in Ireland. He says, "Hey, I just grabbed a piece of wood out of my garage, and I'm just whacking them out instead. It's way faster and easier, and it doesn't dent them." And I says, "Okay, well, let me try that." And we tried it, and sure enough, yeah, it doesn't dent them. And now we have a fully automatic case ejector system because it's hard to get the whack-em bar, we called it, the plastic Delrin piece in there to not hit the cutters to extract that case. And yeah, it doesn't mess up the case mouths whatsoever. Not even a little bit. So yeah, it's kind of a rudimentary, barbaric way. Let's just beat it out of here. But it's one of those things that just works.
Yeah, because you could stop the machine, stick something, a rod, plastic rod, or even plastic would be the best, on the inside of the case, and then tap it out. You could do that.
Yep.
But I've turned thousands of pieces of brass, and I just tap it out every time, and it's just perfectly fine.
Yeah, and with the automatic system now, I'll just sit and watch TV. I don't even have to look at the machine. I just hit the button, it pops the case out, I catch it, put the new case in, hit start, and I'm still watching the same TV show. And it's getting to the point now where we're going to have an automatic case feeding system to where you just dump the brass in, walk away, and the machine fully inserts and ejects and turns all your brass for you.
Wow. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, that's something that we're coming out with. And, originally I thought nobody's going to want that and or pay for that. So we try to design our products to where the average shooter can do his best to have that product. But there's some people that they want fully automated everything. So we're on our way in design and process on having a fully automatic neck turning machine where you can dump 100 pieces of brass, go get lunch, come back, and they're all done.
So before the IDOD, I literally was thinking about buying a small tabletop CNC milling machine. Okay, and I had a two-plate system that I had designed, where you were going to put all the cases, 100 pieces of brass, on there, and then it was going to have a for example, for 284, the body is what, 501.
Roughly 500.
I was gonna make it like 497 or so, 499, whatever. I was gonna play around with the dimensions, but that I was gonna put 100 pieces of brass on an aluminum plate, come down and squeeze it, pinch it.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And that was gonna hold the brass perfectly stable, and then I was gonna have a CNC mill, and it was gonna come down with a regular conventional neck turner. And then just sit there and, I kind of envision about a 200 or 300 pieces of brass.
Yep.
That, again, I could set it up, hit go, walk away, come back when it's done.
Yep.
I actually envision all that. And then when the iDot came about, I'm like, okay, maybe I don't have to do this. Maybe I can do that. But
yeah.
I guess all that to say that I'm one of those that prefers automated, because I don't have that much time. And people ask me why I have a Prometheus. I'm like, because they say, well, why do you have a Prometheus when you can get the same results with this other machine that's a lot cheaper?
Yeah.
I'm like, it's just not. It's time.
What do you value your time? What do you value your time that you could be spending with your kids or doing something, working to make something more profitable? I try to explain that to people all the time.
Yeah, it's all about time. For me, I'm just looking for my time back. And the Prometheus, I've had it, over 10 years now. And it's countless. I don't even know how much time it has saved me. And the beauty about it is, I can sell it today and get probably all of my money back.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So it's free. And that's the thing about the Prometheus. It's such a well-built machine that there's nothing out there that can beat it in the sense of how it works.
No.
I bought and sold a handful or more scales over the years, and still the same Prometheus works the same.
Yep. No, that's a unique system. How it works, and it's really simple system, but it's unique and it works really well and works fast.
And gravity, right? It's gonna work. And
it's our
number
constant,
one, and two is the fact that you drop the powder right into the case. That to me is the biggest thing, because usually I would screw up always when it was going from the scale to the case.
Yeah,
that's where I would, the funnel and all that. The Prometheus, just drop it in. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, the point is, it's all about time saving, just like your iDot and this whole new fully automated deal. And the thing about the fully automated deal, you can get 3 or 4 guys together, buy the whole system, and then they can turn all their brass in no time.
We sell machines to a club, a shooting club. Whatever. There's 10, 20 guys in that club. They'll all go in on it, and they'll borrow it and, split the cost over all of them. And by the time the last guy is done turning his brass, the first guy's ready to turn a new set of brass, and they just share it around that way.
Yeah, well, again, there's multiple ways to go about it. All right, let's talk about we talked about how you got started, and let's talk about how you're a coach on the U.S. rifle team now, because that's quite an impressive trajectory for being in the sport, not for a very long time.
Yeah, it was different. I tried out for the rifle team. I think our tryout was in the fall of 2018, and I got on as a shooter. I think there were 6 of us. Jake Christopherson, Bowling, me, and there was 3 other people. And to be honest with you, at each of the tryouts that we did, because we had to do tryouts twice a year, it seemed like I could never be tuned up enough to have the tightest gun to get the highest rating. But Dan Bramley and I worked so much on wind that I thought, why don't I just concentrate on, maybe being a wind coach? And Dan Bramley and I talked about it, and, we have enough shooters on our team to have a Rutland team, which is a 4-man team, and then the main team's an 8-man team. And he says, well, if you want to take it over and do that, then you can do that. And then, Bryan Bowling, he's the back coach, and, Bryan Bowling and I, he's national champion also. Me and him just click together. It's kind of like UNC Bold. And both of us working together, we do very, very well communicating and understanding each other. And so, yeah, it's kind of a dream come true being a coach on the rifle team, and hopefully next cycle maybe be a coach on the main team.
So, being a coach, what is that? Obviously, you didn't just become a coach. Like, we need to make sure that people understand this. You don't just say, "Hey, I want to be a coach," and they're like, "Okay, you're the coach."
Yeah.
And there may be some people that see this and go, "Oh, well, of course, he's friends with Bramley." No,
no, that's not how it was at all. In fact,
I want to make sure.
That hurts me more than it helps me. Dan Bramley is way more harder on me than he would be if I didn't really know him. So yeah, it wasn't because of that. We started. Well, to go way back, Bryan Bowling asked me in 2018 to be on the team he was putting together that ended up being Team Cirrus. We shot Team Cirrus for 2.5 years, and then that team kind of dissolved, and then I said, well, let's put together our own team. So it's been me and Bryan Bowling, always been the constant, and we've went through shooters over time, and we've been 4th place finish a lot of times in national events, and this last nationals we were able to get on the podium. We had a 3rd place finish and get medals, and I think Dan noticed that and wanted to give us a chance and says, hey, so we went through some tryouts, coaching, and he's looked at our plot sheets and everything and says, well, we'll give her a shot. And that's where we're at now. And we, as we shoot along you guys in practice, and it's really rewarding to do it. And coaching to me is very analytical. When I look at a condition, it's like a algebraic equation going through my head between all the flags, the Mirage, and the direction of velocities on what value to get. And I don't want to say it comes easy to me, but it comes different to me than some shooters, some coaches. Some coaches, really prevalent with Mirage, and some are really prevalent with flags, some are really prevalent with both. I like to be both, but it's just something that I've worked a lot on, to the point where I bought my own set of wind flags, and I'll go out into the desert myself and shoot just to learn what it is. Always wanting to learn what those conditions are doing. And that stems from, long-range hunting, where you're shooting at an elk or whatever 1,000 yards away. You can't just hold center mass. What is that wind doing? So that's where the interest started from for me.
Yeah, so now you're a coach on the U.S. rifle team, and as you said, you and Bowling been working together for a long time.
Yeah.
What is it like? What's the preparation like as a coach versus being a shooter, going to South Africa and not shooting for yourself, but shooting for the United States of America? What is that like?
It's almost, so I believe as a shooter, like on the team, U.S. rifle team, when you shoot a vertical shot, I feel, man, I really let the coach down. I let the team down. I should have held good vertical. We would have had that 10 or X. And to be honest with you, it's less stressful for me being a coach than it is a shooter. And I believe that I can just be in the zone and concentrate more as a coach, and hopefully shooters bring good vertical and we can do pretty good. But preparation, like you say, everybody else on the team, they just have to bring a good tight gun, shoots good vertical, point it where the coach says, and they're done as far as their involvement in shooting. Where the coach, I'm responsible for 4 shooters, and I have to make sure I do good for all 4 of those shooters for multiple times. And it's stressful, but I believe practicing a lot gives you the confidence to go in there and know hey, when I call this condition, it's going to be pretty close. At least I hope so. There are times where you still shoot a 7. I don't think we shot a 7. We shot an 8 at Southwest Nationals and team. We weren't the only ones, but it's still like, why did that happen? We don't want to do that at the world event. So we plot everything, and we looked and we said, hey, here's where we went wrong. And I'll go back and look at all those plot sheets and data after every team event and see where the mistakes were made and try to improve on that for the next time.
And that's all you can do. Again, it's either you're either losing or you're learning, or you're either winning or you're learning, right? And you just got to keep on going. Now, what about let's talk about shooters, because you've been shooting team matches long enough that you probably ran into some shooters that they don't really want to do what the coach tells them to do. Have you ran into that?
I've learned that you can be a great individual shooter, top 5 at national events, but you are horrible as a team shooter. And I've learned that with shooters, and a lot of it comes from nerves. In 2019 nationals, we shot a string first day of long range teams. Bryan Blake and I both shot cleans at 1,000 yards. Nobody else in the whole field did it, so we were on top. And going into prep on the next pair of shooters, I was in the pits, and there's a shot fired in prep. Well, I says, I know that's not one of my guys. Sure enough, I looked up, there's a hole in our target. So then I'm thinking, I hope somebody crossfired. Well, it wasn't. So that shooter in prep thought he was dry firing. And he didn't know he grabbed ammo out of his box. And he dry fired, and he felt bad about it. He cost us the match. We were 9 points from winning, and they took 10 points off for our first shot. So it was disappointing, but it was a learning experience. Now as coaches, we don't allow the shooters to have their ammo by them in prep. And not to say they're going to do that. I think it's just a psychologically confusing thing for them where they get nervous at team. I had another shooter, Jason Cohen. He's my top shooter now on our team FCP. When we started him, he was so nervous and shaking. I remember we were at Southwest Nationals 2020 or so. We were shooting him in ciders, and all of a sudden he had a pile of brass that was the size of a grapefruit on the ground from ciders, trying to figure it out. And I stopped. I says, Bull, he was main coach that time, says, he's nervous. We're not doing anything, still shooting ciders all over the place. You need to stop and let him collect his nerves. And once he got past that, he was pretty good. I think a lot of shooters just get nervous going on team when they're great individual shooters. So yeah, there's a lot of psychological things that happen during teams that people don't realize that you don't experience in individuals.
Yeah, team is totally different. And having said that, I think everybody needs to get on a team like now. Get with some friends, whatever. Get on a team. Learn how to shoot team. Learn. You just need to get on a team. It's going to be the most helpful thing you do in order for you to get better. It's because now, just like that teammate of yours that shot in prep. Well, he learned, but all of you learned. Oh crap! This is now we all change how we do things because of that. Like you don't let just him learn that lesson. That's you guys all learned it, and it's anyway. So that's where team comes in. Also, when something goes well, then they share with each other, and now you learn that, right? And I mean, look at our team. Seabold and I started that. Well, we each had our team. I was Lapua, he was Brooks, and we never had enough. This is back when nobody wanted to shoot team. And we had my time. A couple of shooters each. So finally we decided to join forces. But this is like back in 2014 or so. And since then, Seabold, we had Pat Scully. So we had Seabold, Jay Christopherson, Todd Hendricks, myself, and Pat Scully, all national champions. Yeah. Right? Pat's no longer with the team, but the point is, you get better. You know?
Yes. Yeah, and that's how, when I first started shooting team, I was a shooter, not a coach. It was impressive for me, and I think I was shooting under Michelle, and I don't know if it was Michelle Gallagher, obviously very well-versed coach. And I would look at a condition, I had no idea what it should be, and she would call a shot, and I'd be like, oh, that's what it should be. I learned a lot from the coaches on what to do in certain conditions, just as a shooter on that team.
Yeah, you learn how they pace themselves. How, you know, the big one is you learn when to stop, because
Yes,
when
that's
you're
the biggest
shooting, when you're starting out, you really don't know what you should be shooting with, or you don't know when you should be shooting and when you should be stopping. And when you're with a coach, which is very experienced, and they go, we're gonna wait, you go, oh, I would have just shot through this because I don't know any better, right?
Yeah.
So
I used to see these coaches, like Siebold and these other top coaches, they would shoot an X and they would stop. And as a new shooter, I just thought that was the craziest thing. You just shot a perfect shot. Now you're going to stop? Why would you do that? And now in individuals, when I'm shooting and I get a newer person scoring me, I'll shoot 10s and X's or whatever, and then I'll stop. And they're like, what are you doing? They look at you like you're crazy. And I say, well, you see, it doesn't look the same as it did a minute ago, right? And they say, yeah, but you shot an X. You can't stop. And that's one of the hardest things for new shooters to gather, is when to stop.
Well, that's what we discussed at the beginning. It's some can't stop, and it's hard to stop because you just shot an X. So the next shot's going to go exactly where that one went. Well, and we as experienced shooters know that you can shoot fast, but you have to keep your eye on the conditions. And if it changes, hit the brakes. It doesn't matter that it's an X. Hit the brakes, because if you don't stop, it may still be an X, but more than likely it won't, because something changed. It's 1,000 yards away, and the target's kind of small.
Well, I tell people, you understand the difference between an X and a 9 is 2 inches and 9/16 of an inch. That's it. So a little over 2.5 inches difference between an X or a 9. So that's very, very close. So you got to be on top of it.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's very interesting. So South Africa. What's what's your prediction?
For me, there's a lot of unknowns. I mean, first of all, I've never traveled outside the country, let alone shoot outside the country. You know, there's other people that have done world events in Canada, and the worlds prior to that was done in Raton, New Mexico. But yeah, to travel literally all the way around the world and say, okay, you need to shoot your best and coach your best against the whole world. And there's a lot of unknowns, and I don't want to say scariness, but, you know, thinking about all the things that could go wrong. What am I forgetting? What am I not going to think about? What are the conditions there like? You know, as you know, every range is different. Anybody who thinks if you know one range, you know them all, they haven't shot very many places. And I think there's going to be a lot of unknowns in the beginning on, are their flags the same weight? Do they leave their flags up overnight to where they collect moisture, and the first relay the next morning, they're going to be a little heavier? All those types of things that you have to learn at that range and how those people do it. You know, another thing for me, I guess we're the only ones in the whole world who pull our own targets. In the United States, we are. Everybody else in the world, they have pullers. And having non-shooters pulling for you isn't always a great thing, and it could be a good thing. And that's another unknown for me. It's like you're almost at the mercy of that puller sometimes on how it can go.
Yeah, we're used to shooting fast, and if they're not used to pulling fast, because that's the other thing, right? Most of the world, they pair fire. So the pullers, they're not used to pulling fast. But team matches are typically string fire. And if they're not used to pulling fast, it's it's something that we have to adapt to. But I think we're going to do fine. We have good shooters, we have good coaches. I'm not worried about that. What about your guns when you get there as far as holding tune?
You know, you hear people talk about that, and I think I've traveled 6 or 7 ranges around the country multiple times. I think when you look at guys like Todd Hendricks, Jay Christopherson, you know, those guys that don't ever shoot a national match in their quadrant of the United States, but they travel and they're able to bring a gun and it shoots good enough to win national events. I believe when your gun is tuned, your gun is tuned. Now, with that said, it can go out of tune, but like you and I have discussed, that's why we have tuners. And that can take, you know, some of that tune and make it more in tune or make it more out of tune, depending on which direction you go and what the conditions are. I believe things like, you know, shipping your ammo long and modifying seating depth slightly when you get there could have some effect on pressures and changes also. Biggest effect on tunes, in my opinion, is temperature, and the second is humidity. So if you data log and have all that information during your testing, and you know this tuner setting or this seating depth worked best at these conditions, these barometric conditions, you can apply that before you ever start shooting. And I learned that from John Myers, probably the best tuner there ever was, just because he knew by these conditions what to do not only before the string started, but halfway through the string. He would reach up there and turn his tuner, and he wasn't guessing. He knew my barrel is now this much hotter. I know if I turn it this much more, it will continue to be super tight for the remainder of the string. You know, John Myers has won 3 national NRA championships and 2 Southwest Nationals, so you can't argue with results like that from these people.
Well, some people will.
Some people will, but they're just in denial.
But so anyway, that's the and that's why we showing up early, and that's why I always like showing up early, shooting before the main event. You know, they're gonna have a national championship, and again, to me, that's practice.
Yep.
It doesn't do. I don't think it does anybody any good to win that. I mean, obviously, people are going to try to win it, and somebody will win it, but that's going to be my learning session.
And I suspect what you're going to do, like what I'm going to do, is I'm going to shoot conditions maybe that I normally wouldn't shoot, but just to see what that condition will do for the team event. Because you may be running up on time where you have to shoot that condition you wouldn't normally shoot, and you need to know what it's going to do.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot of learning that we have to do in a very short period of time. And again, this is where, you know, you talked about the different tools in the tool bag. Hopefully we have enough that we can adapt quickly, and we can, by the time the World Championship starts, that we are, you know, in tune enough that, you know, in tune with the rifles, but also in tune with our condition reading ability, that we can pull it off. And I think we are all experienced enough that we shouldn't have a problem. Also, the benefit of being on the U.S. rifle team, right, is we all are part of the same team. So if you see something, you're going to share with the rest of the team, with the rest of the coaching staff, and vice versa. If you see something that you don't understand, or you have no idea why it's doing that, you can ask any of the other coaches, and, you know, gonna have a conversation and figure it all out together. Because again, this is a big team, and we're shooting for USA there. It's totally different.
Yep. And then you'll see, you know, even during our practices, or maybe we're even competing against each other's national events, I'll go up and talk to Bob Siebold right in the middle of a pit change. Just if I can get one bit of intel and he can for me, even though we're competing against each other because it's not a U.S. rifle team event, we're still learning off each other and bounce those ideas. And I think as coaches, everybody coaches totally different. Everybody sees things differently. As you know, Bob is primarily a wind flag guy, and there's things he sees I've never seen wind flags, but I may see something Mirage he doesn't usually see. And I think if we can all teach each other that at the Worlds, that's going to be a big benefit, and hopefully we can come away with the gold.
I don't think we're going to have a problem with that. I honestly don't.
That's what we're striving for.
Yeah. Well, again, we have
Yeah.
a very strong coaching staff. I mean, Trudy. I don't know if you ever shot under Trudy. I've shot under Seabolt many times, but I've also shot under Trudy at the last World Championship. She can read the wind, and she's one of those that can stop and go willy nilly, and she will not only can she stop, she can jump back in, like with an X or a 10, you know. Seabolt can as well. That's my point, you know. And I think we have a very strong coaching staff. I don't think there's going to be a problem.
No, and not just the coaching staff, the shooters. Like, you look at the team, and I haven't counted them up, but there's half of them have to be national champions. And these aren't just random people that, you know, we just picked out of the shooting hat. These are people that have tried out for years and years, gaining rank to be at the position they are at on this shooting team. And that ranking came from, can your gun stay in tune over the course of 4 years? We've had tryouts twice a year, and you get a rating and ranked on that. That proves, can you bring a tuned gun to the Worlds and shoot good vertical for the coaches? And so it's not just the coaches, but the shooters are extremely versed, well-rounded shooters that are very good at what they do.
Let's switch gears right quick. We're kind of running out of time here. But let's talk about your FCP cartridge, or the PRCW, which is what I shot. Where do you see that going?
Yep.
Is that the next big thing?
So what that stemmed from was, I've shot RSOM or RSOM improved since I started, you know, or right after I started. Shot what they called 7BBM, which is basically an Ackley 7-SOM. The problem is 7-SOM brass became non-existent, and before that it was already hard to get. Norma was the only one who made it, so they would make it in runs, and you couldn't get it for a year. Then ADG made it, but that was the same problem. They would only make a short run, so it became to where we need to have a cartridge that's designed around Lapua brass. And obviously Lapua brass is the best brass in my opinion, so if we can design a cartridge around that, that's what we want to do. And I want to develop a cartridge that had the same case capacity as the 7R SOM, so we can shoot the same velocity nodes with not having super high pressure. The 7 PRCW, correct me if I'm wrong, but the basic case body design is just an expanded 6.5 PRC. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Or
Just
pretty
neck
close
up.
to say.
Just neck it up. Everything else is the same,
So
except for the
when you do
200
that,
line. The
you
200
get
line.
case capacity.
We for some reason Hornady got it wrong,
Yeah.
but at the 200 line you got to increase that
I know.
to 535. But anyway, other than
Yeah.
that, it's just
Yep.
same.
Same. So there's nothing wrong with that. Obviously, you won with that. There's other people that are doing great with that. So I don't want to talk bad about that. But I'm a fan of 40-degree shoulders, and I'm a fan of case capacity being right for what you're trying to do. So with the 7-6.5 PRC, you have a case capacity roughly 66 grains, which is actually the same as what a 284 Shaheen is.
It's actually 70.
It's a shorter body than a Shaheen.
It's actually 70. What I've measured. Anyway, mine are 70.
60, yeah.
Well, anyway,
So we wanted something at the RSOM, which was, it's 72 and a half grains. So I wanted a case with a 40-degree shoulder, had that same case capacity with Lapua brass. So after, a bunch of mathematical calculations, we developed the 7 FCP. And I can't say it does anything better than what you're doing, but I don't believe it does anything worse. It's kind of like comparing the 6BR to the 6 Dasher. The 6BR is extremely accurate, so is the Dasher. The Dasher is a 40-degree, the 6BR is a 30-degree, which is like the PRC, to the FCP. I think they both do great things, just slightly differently. Brass growth with the 40-degree shoulder, the flame travel, I think, is maybe more efficient, but that's all going to prove out in over time. This cartridge I developed last fall, we probably sold 50 reamers and stuff to people all over the world. Dan Bramley used it at Southwest Nationals. Like you say, he only dropped 1 point the first day. I used it. There were other shooters using it. I think that line of cartridge is the best brass to start out with. And with, Capstone pumping the brakes on the 284 brass for a year or so, people are looking for other options. So the PRC, the FCP, those are all good options.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the next best thing just for simplicity. And case life, right? That PRC, like I said, I measured mine at 70 grains, and it's proven to be larger than a Shaheen slightly. It takes about 6 to 8 tenths of powder more to get the same velocity. So it's slightly larger.
Yep.
It works. And I got that brass that I won the Southwest Nationals with. I had 9 firings on that brass, and it's still. I'm probably going to take it to the World Championship because then I can just leave it there when I'm done. But it's really good. Really, it's a really good cartridge. It's very efficient. It's not. I don't think barrel life is going to be anything worse than the 284 Shaheens just because it's running.
No.
It's running lower pressures and
yes,
same speeds pretty much. And mine, I'm kind of pumping it kind of hot right now, but just because of the World Championship. But if I was just shooting it locally, I'd probably slow it down. Just I don't need to go 2950. I can go 2920, 2880, and then just have brass life like crazy.
Yep. Alex Wheeler even said he doesn't believe the 284 is some extremely accurate cartridge. It's just a cartridge that we have a lot of experience with. And I think that's now coming with the PRC line, that we're going to gain this experience on what to use and what components and what powder and what speeds, that it's going to become the mainstream over time.
Yeah, I just think the fact that Lapua is making brass for it, that in itself is, if they had made brass for the SOM would be what everybody would be shooting, or the majority, right? It's the SOM had a really
100%.
strong following, and the reason I never did the SOM is because I couldn't get good brass for it. Everybody, I saw a lot of people shooting really good scores with the SOM, but always complaining about brass. And again, I didn't want to go down that route. Jay has had this.
No, I totally agree.
Jay has had the PRCW for years now, but he was shooting what is it called? AGD brass?
ADG. ADG.
ADG brass. And I'm like, I'm not gonna go. Again, I hear it's really good brass, but I've never used it. So, learning something, a new cartridge, but on top of that, add new brass and new man, I'm not, and plus, I don't like changing. You know me, I don't like changing. I like to wait until everybody's kind of got it figured out. And once I saw that everybody some people, Jay was shooting his really good, a few others, Jay kind of kept it on the wraps for a few years, and then I see people starting shooting it, and I said, okay, it's time. So I chambered one up, and I chambered it after Nationals last year, and started playing with it, and I was like, man, this looks really promising, because I didn't want to burn up my 284 Shaheen that I have saved up for World Championship. So I started playing with it, and I thought, well, you know what, I'm going to take it to Southwest Nationals and see if this thing's going to make the trip to the World. That's my other gun. And I took 2 different PRCWs to Southwest Nationals. I shot one at 600 and one at the long range, and I got second place at 600.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they both shoot amazingly well. I think it's a cartridge that is very easy to tune and very easy to shoot, because going from a 284 to a PRCW or even an FCP, there's not that big of a difference in recoil.
No.
Whereas if you want to go to a 300 WSM, that's drastically different.
And powder, like 300 WSM, you are burning 65 plus grains of powder every shot. With the PRC or FCP, we're burning in the 56 to 57 grains of powder. And that equates to not only recoil, but barrel heat over a string. Not to say that 300 WSM doesn't work. There's lots of national champions that have used it, but you got to be a specific type of shooter to handle that type of recoil throughout days and days of shooting. And like you say, we can take the PRC line of cartridges and tune it to the Shaheen speeds, or we can shoot it up high, and it's going to shoot accurate at either of those speeds.
Yeah, and a lot of people think the issue with a 300, when we say recoil, they think it's on your shoulder. It's actually, for me, it was that it moves the whole rear bag. You got to keep chasing that rear bag, and you end up on a different target, and you have to position yourself just right. And anyway, I fought it for about a year, and I finally gave it up. But this PRCW, man, I just started shooting it, and it felt no different than shooting just my regular Shaheen. So, again, it works.
No, yeah, it's yep. And like you say, if the Sound Brass was available or Lapua made Sound Brass, we would all be shooting that. I mean, guys like Bill Kalagi that have won both the V2s, the only V2s that we've had, you can't argue with that accuracy and the performance of that cartridge to last the Worlds from Kenny Adams in 2013 in Raton. That was won with a 7 SAUM as well. I believe the 2017 Worlds was also one with the 7 SAUM.
Well, the next one's going to be one with a PRCW or a Shaheen. I haven't decided yet.
Well, that's a good prediction.
Anyway, Bryan, it's been great, man. I appreciate it. So they want to find you, FClassProducts.com. Is that correct?
Yep, that's our website. Yep.
So the cool thing about your FCP cartridge, regardless of the shape or the whatever, the big, to me, the beautiful thing about it is they can come to you, they get the reamer, the dies, they get a full package to where they're done.
Yep, you get one-stop shop. That's always the problem with going a new cartridge. It doesn't matter if it's a 284 or whatever it is. A shooter has to source parts from multiple places, and that equates to 6 months, 8 months, a year, whatever, to get all those components. We've done all the grunt work and the design to where we offer, seating dies, either arbor press, 7/8/14 threaded seating dies, sizing dies with various neck diameters for turn, no turn, Girard trimmer case holders, IDOT, Autodot case holders, case resizing bump gauges that are calibrated, go gauges, no-go gauges, everything in one shop. You can buy it all as one thing. You buy it on a Monday, you can be shooting that cartridge on a Friday, even down to the barrel.
There you go. That's the beauty about what you're doing. And again, I don't think there's a lick of difference between the two. However, the fact that you put the whole kit together and somebody can just come and buy that, I think that's very helpful for a lot of shooters, because they're going to be able to, like you said, one-stop shop. They don't, that is the biggest pain for somebody. I hate changing cartridges. I hate it with a passion, because, well, what you just said. And sometimes you go get dies from somebody, and then you find out that they didn't work. And you find out after a while. And if you're not a very experienced shooter, you don't even know what the problem is. You don't even know that you have a problem. You just think, oh, this thing doesn't shoot. Well, you may have a mismatched, fooling sizing die, that it's really not sizing the base. And 3 or 4 firings in, now you got clickers that you can't get rid of. Or you have, whatever. Any of those issues that you and I have learned to deal with over the years. But most new shooters, they have no idea that they can even happen. So anyway, they can come to you, FClassProducts.com. That's it.
Yes, sir. Well, appreciate it. Thanks for
my money. Take my money, Bryan. All right, man. See you in
appreciate it.
South Africa, I guess, huh?
Yep. See you in a couple weeks.
All right, man. Later.
All right. Thank you. Yep.